Sometimes it isn't a kiss or a touch that changes everything. It's the way a single whisper can echo in your heart forever. It started in the quiet corner of a bookstore cafe, the kind of place where time always seemed to move a little slower. The smell of coffee hung in the air, blending with the faint trace of old pages and polished wood. I'd come there to escape the noise of my own thoughts, never expecting that one small glance would reroute them completely. She was there, standing in front of a shelf near the window, running her fingers lightly over the spines of books. There was nothing hurried about the way she moved. She tilted her head slightly as she read the titles, strands of dark hair slipping forward until she brushed them back with a practiced grace. I didn't even notice the people around me anymore, just the calm curve of her posture, the elegance in something as simple as reaching for a book. When she turned, I caught the faintest trace of her perfume, something warm and floral, like jasmine after rain. She carried herself differently from anyone I knew my age, confident, steady, but with a softness hidden underneath. Her eyes met mine for just a moment across the aisle, not in the way strangers glance and look away, but in a way that held, like she had measured the pause on purpose. I should have looked back down at my coffee. I should have let the moment pass. But there was something in the faint lift of her smile, a smile that didn't try to prove anything, that made me want to know what she might say if we spoke. The chance came quicker than I expected. She walked to the counter with a book in her hand, but when the barista was caught up with another order, she stepped aside, standing just near enough that I could hear the faint rhythm of her breath. My own heart quickened for reasons I couldn't justify. "You've read that one?" she asked suddenly, nodding toward the book sitting on my table. Her voice was low and certain, touched with curiosity rather than politeness. I nodded, surprised she had noticed. "Yeah, it's heavier than it looks, but worth it." Her lips curved slightly, almost teasing. "That's usually how the best ones are." And just like that, the air shifted. The noise of the cafe faded into the background hum, and it felt as if she had pulled me into her orbit without even trying. She didn't sit, not yet, but the tilt of her body angled closer, her eyes steady on mine, like she was waiting to see if I would falter. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't anything anyone else in that cafe would have noticed. But for me, it was the spark, the kind of beginning you don't see until later when it becomes impossible to forget. And even then, before either of us knew what we were stepping into, I could already sense something rare, that this wasn't just going to be another passing encounter. She found me again a week later, almost as if the bookstore cafe had become our unspoken meeting ground. I was in my usual corner, a cup cooling by my side, pretending to read, but mostly replaying the brief moment we had shared days before. I didn't expect her to remember me. People like her, self-possessed, elegant, always seeming to belong to a quieter rhythm, rarely seemed to cross paths twice with people like me. But then she walked in, sunlight spilling in behind her, and there was that same steady grace. She scanned the shelves for a moment before her eyes flickered in my direction. I felt something tighten in my chest when she smiled, faint, almost casual, but unmistakably meant for me. This time, she didn't hover at the counter or keep her distance. She approached, holding a book in one hand, her other lightly brushing along the edge of the table as if testing whether she belonged there. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, her voice low, carrying a tone that suggested she already knew the answer. I shook my head, sliding the chair out just slightly. She set her book down, an older edition of a travel memoir, the corners worn soft, and sat across from me. For a moment, I wasn't sure what to say. I had imagined this, her sitting near me, but now that it was real, I felt caught between eagerness and restraint. She seemed to sense it, her expression gentle but unreadable, as though she was giving me space to decide how much I wanted to reveal. "You read quickly," she remarked, nodding at the book I'd been carrying the last time. "Already onto something new." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Not quickly, just when a story pulls me in, I lose hours without noticing." Her eyes lit up, the corners creasing with warmth. "That's the best kind of distraction." The conversation slipped into motion like a river finding its current. We spoke about books first, How she loved stories that carried you across oceans without leaving your chair. How I leaned towards stories that peeled people open, showing the fragile parts beneath. She listened without interrupting, her gaze intent but not heavy, as though every word mattered more than I realized. When she laughed, it was quiet but genuine, the kind of laugh that seemed to echo after it ended. I caught myself watching the way her fingers curled around her mug, graceful and unhurried, as if she had learned to savor even the smallest things. At one point, our hands brushed across the table when I reached for my cup. It was nothing, really an accident, but she didn't pull away immediately. There was a heartbeat of pause, a silent acknowledgement, before she withdrew with a faint smile. By the time she rose to leave, the light outside had shifted, and I realized we'd been talking for over an hour. She tucked the book beneath her arm, gave me a glance that lingered a fraction longer than necessary, and said softly, "I'll see you around." It wasn't a promise, not exactly, but the way it settled in my chest, it felt like one. The next time we saw each other, it wasn't planned, though by then I had begun to hope for it. She was leaving the cafe just as I was arriving, and something in the way her eyes lit up at the sight of me told me it wasn't entirely chance for her either. She hesitated for half a second before stepping closer, balancing her bag on her shoulder. "Going for a walk?" she asked, almost as if she had already decided we would. I nodded, and just like that, we fell in a step together outside, the city quieter than usual, the sun sinking low and painting everything in muted gold. There wasn't much space on the narrow sidewalk, so our arms brushed occasionally, fabric against fabric, each contact small but impossible to ignore. For a while, neither of us spoke, and yet the silence didn't feel heavy. It was the kind of silence that seemed to hum with an unspoken question. What are we to each other? Finally, she broke it. "I used to walk here often," she said softly, glancing at the row of lilac trees just beginning to bloom. "When things felt too loud. The air here always slows me down." There was a quiet in her tone, as though she were admitting something fragile. I turned slightly, studying her profile in the fading light. The curve of her cheek, the small crease near her brow, the way her lips softened when she looked at the flowers. "Do you still come here for that?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine, holding for a beat too long before sliding back to the path ahead. "Not as often. Life has a way of filling every empty space until there's no quiet left." She smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "But I miss it." There was the first glimpse of something hidden beneath her calm exterior. A loneliness, maybe, or just the weight of years and expectations. It stirred something in me, a pull I couldn't name. I wanted to say something that mattered, something that would make her feel less alone. Instead, I just walked closer, letting my arm brush hers again, this time without moving away. She didn't pull back. Her sleeve lingered against mine, as though she welcomed the contact. The evening air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of lilac blossoms. She drew her shawl tighter, and for a moment I almost offered my hand, almost reached across the small distance between us. But I hesitated, afraid of breaking the fragile rhythm we had found. When we reached the end of the street, she stopped, turning toward me. Her eyes held mine, calm but searching, as if she was waiting for something I wasn't sure I could give. Then she smiled, soft, wistful, and said, "Thank you for walking with me." Just 7 words. But the way she said them stayed with me long after she was gone, echoing like a secret I wasn't supposed to keep. It was one of those evenings when the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to hold the rain or let it fall. The air carried that sharp, metallic scent that comes just before a storm, and the wind teased loose strands of her hair across her face. We had been walking again, not with any particular destination, just following the rhythm of our steps, side by side. When the drizzle finally began, it was light at first, almost playful, brushing against our skin like a whisper. I instinctively shrugged out of my jacket and held it out to her. She gave me a look that was part amusement, part hesitation. "You'll freeze," she murmured, but her hands reached for it anyway, slipping into the warmth it still held for my body. The sleeves hung slightly long on her, and she pulled them close around herself. As she adjusted the collar, our fingers brushed, nothing more than an accident, really. But instead of pulling away, she let her hand linger for the smallest beat. My chest tightened at the pause, at the soft, deliberate way her touch rested there before retreating. The rain thickened, though it still wasn't enough to drive us apart. We ducked under the awning of a closed shop, the sound of droplets pattering against the tin roof above us. The space was small, forcing us close. I could feel the heat of her arm against mine, our shoulders pressed together lightly. For a moment, we didn't speak. The air was filled only with the scent of rain and the quiet rhythm of her breathing. She tilted her head toward me, her hair brushing the side of my face as she leaned just slightly closer. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly, her voice almost lost under the rain. I swallowed, searching for words. "I'm just thinking." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "About what?" I hesitated. I couldn't tell her the truth, that I was thinking about the closeness, about how every small touch seemed to etch itself into me. So I said the safer thing, about how calm this feels, like the world slowed down just for us. Her gaze lingered on me then, steady and unreadable, and for a moment I thought she might say something. Instead, she shifted just enough that her hand brushed against mine again, deliberate this time. Our fingers didn't entwine, but they rested there, side by side, touching lightly, as if testing the space between us. It was such a small thing, just the weight of her hand against mine, but the warmth of it spread through me, deeper than I could explain. The rain continued to fall, but inside that little shelter, it felt like nothing else existed. Just her, close enough for me to hear the softness in her breath, close enough for me to feel that fragile line between friendship and something far more dangerous. And though neither of us moved further, neither of us pulled away either. The rain had passed by the time we found ourselves back inside the cafe, both of us damp at the edges, carrying that faint freshness that follows a storm. She chose a corner table this time, away from the windows, where the lamplight cast a soft, golden glow across her face. She sat with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, fingers slender and steady, though the way she stared into the rising steam made me wonder what she was thinking. I wanted to ask, but something in her stillness told me not to press. For a while, we didn't need words. The hum of distant conversations filled the silence, and the occasional clink of cups against saucers marked the passage of time. Every now and then, her gaze would flick toward me, brief but searching, as if she were weighing what she could allow herself to say. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual, edged with something almost fragile. "Do you ever feel like parts of you are missing? Not because you lost them, but because you never had the chance to hold them in the first place?" Her question caught me off guard. I looked at her, at the faint crease in her brow, at the way her lips pressed together after the words slipped out, as though she was already regretting them. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think everyone does. Some people just learn to hide it better." Her eyes met mine then, steady but glimmering with something unspoken. And for the first time, I saw past her confident composure, past the way she carried herself like someone who had lived enough life to be unshakable. Beneath it all, there was a quiet ache. She shifted slightly, placing her hand flat on the table between us. The motion seemed simple, but her fingers brushed against mine as if it were intentional. My breath caught at the contact, the warmth of her skin sparking something deep in my chest. Her voice lowered, almost a whisper now. "You make me feel different, lighter somehow, like I'm not carrying so much." She trailed off, shaking her head faintly, a flush of color rising in her cheeks. I shouldn't be saying this, but she already had, and the words hung between us like something delicate and precious. I wanted to answer, to tell her what she made me feel too. The restless energy, the way her presence steadied me even as it set my heart racing. But something in her expression stopped me. She looked as though she had stepped too close to a line she wasn't ready to cross, and any wrong word might push her further back. So instead, I let the silence hold us. I let her hand linger against mine, neither of us pulling away. And though her words were unfinished, though she tried to swallow them back, they had already carved themselves into me. Words that would not leave, words that carried more weight than any confession could. The evening we walked back together, the city was hushed in a way that made every sound feel sharper. The soft buzz of a street lamp, the faint hum of crickets in the distance, the quiet rhythm of her heels against the pavement. The storm had passed hours ago, but the air still carried that damp sweetness of rain-soaked earth. We weren't in a rush. She walked with her hands folded loosely in front of her, her shawl pulled close around her shoulders. The glow of passing windows painted fleeting light across her face, catching in her eyes whenever she turned toward me. It should have been an ordinary walk, but something hung between us heavier than before. Her earlier words, the ones she tried to swallow back, still lingered in my chest. I could feel the pull of them with every step we took. When we reached her street, we slowed. The houses stood quiet, most windows dark, as though the whole world had already folded itself into sleep. She stopped near her gate, but didn't reach for it. Instead, she looked up at me, her expression unreadable. For a moment, we simply stood there. The air was cool, the kind that makes every exhale visible. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, too loud, too fast. Then she stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of her body brushing the edge of mine. Her hair, still faintly scented with rain, grazed my cheek as she leaned in. And then it happened. Her lips hovered near my ear, her breath soft and trembling as she whispered, "You make me feel alive again." The words were fragile, almost broken in the way she let them out, but they struck through me like lightning. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Her voice wavered between fear and release, as though she had been holding those words inside her for far too long. I didn't move, couldn't move. The sound of her whisper echoed through me, louder than the quiet street around us, louder than the pulse in my chest. When she drew back, her eyes avoided mine. She pressed her lips together, almost as if she regretted the confession, as if she wished she could gather the words back before I had the chance to hold them. But it was too late. They were already carved into me. I wanted to say something in return, something that would ease the vulnerability I saw in her face. But nothing I could offer would match the weight of what she had just given me. So instead, I did the only thing I could. I let the silence stretch between us, filled only by the echo of her whisper in my head. She gave a faint, almost apologetic smile before finally stepping back toward her door. And as she disappeared inside, the night seemed colder, emptier, except for the warmth of her words still burning against my ear. The days that followed were different. I carried her whisper everywhere I went. It echoed in the quiet moments, when I stirred my coffee in the morning, when I lay awake at night listening to the stillness of my room. "You make me feel alive again." Those words played like a secret song, filling spaces I didn't know were empty. But with the sweetness came a weight. I worried I'd imagined it, that maybe her voice had trembled not from tenderness but from regret. She hadn't reached out after that night, and I found myself wondering if she wished she hadn't said it at all. It was nearly a week later when I saw her again. She was back in the cafe, seated by the window, the same travel memoir resting unopened in front of her. She looked up the moment I walked in, and just like before, her eyes softened when they found mine. I hesitated, but when she gave the faintest nod toward the empty chair across from her, my chest loosened. I sat, the silence between us full of all the things we hadn't said. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she closed the book and folded her hands on top of it. "About that night," she began, her voice steady but low. "I don't want you to think," she paused, searching for words. "I don't want you to think I regret what I said." Relief flooded me, so sharp it almost hurt. I leaned forward, my voice gentler than I expected. "I haven't stopped thinking about it." Her lips curved into the smallest smile, fragile but real. She glanced down, as though to gather herself, then looked back at me. It scared me, how much I meant it. Something inside me shifted then. The hesitation, the unspoken restraint, all of it fell away. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. She stiffened for just a heartbeat, then relaxed, her fingers curling slightly into my palm. We stayed like that, the world moving quietly around us, until she whispered almost to herself, I don't remember the last time someone made me feel seen. I wanted to tell her everything, that I saw her more clearly than anyone, that every glance, every small touch, every silence we'd shared had shaped itself into something undeniable. But words felt too fragile for what filled my chest. So instead, I let actions speak. Later, as I walked her home once more, the night stretched calm and cool around us. This time, when we stopped at her gate, there was no hesitation. She turned toward me, her expression open, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. I stepped closer, and without thinking, she leaned into me. Her arms slipped around my waist, her cheek resting lightly against my chest. I wrapped her in my embrace, holding her as if the moment might vanish if I let go. Her breath was warm against me, steadying, and I felt the quiet rhythm of her heart against mine. The world outside seemed distant, irrelevant, and in that embrace, I understood. Her whisper had changed everything, not because of the words themselves, but because she had trusted me enough to give them. And now, in my arms, I knew I would carry them with me for as long as I lived.